Terrance Ferguson, who the Rams selected first in the draft on day 2 at number 46. It was a head scratcher for Rams fans because they're like, well, we already have a tight end. I understand they want to look to the future. Higbee, I think he's on his last year with the Rams, and they want to, potentially advance that position. But they also had other needs on the offensive line, looking for a cornerback. So when they decided tight end and Terrance Ferguson in particular, it seemed like they were utilizing that strategy, Lindsay, where they were wanting, and I spoke with Jonathan Stewart, the Pro Bowl running back who out of Oregon, who covers Oregon, is very familiar with Terrance Ferguson's skill sets, if you will. And he said one of the things that he brings to the team is not just a versatility point, but he's got a high IQ. And it seems like he has value. He may not be the best player available, but he fits potentially the scheme and the future. My question for you is, how do you predict, can we predict, I'm throwing you a curveball here maybe, what the Rams offense and their identity will look to, since it sounds like what they liked about Terrance Ferguson was his versatility, was his ability to block, potentially utilizing a 2 tight end set. Do you see that the run game, of course, they also got Jarquez Hunter in the 3rd round, and they already had Blake Corum. Do you see, and how do you see this Rams offense and their identity shifting, knowing, because this is the big question mark, and what the Rams have done so efficiently is weave in young talent, obviously with their veterans, right? Matthew Stafford is on this year-to-year contract situation. Is he going to stay? I mean, he almost left last season, supposedly, after last season. How do you see them selecting a tight end and what that means for the Rams offense in the future?
I'm not sure about the future. I'll say for right now that it could tell us, I think that they're very smart, and they're not alone in this area, about being like, here's what we want to do. Here's the idea. Here's how we want our offense to run. And then even in terms of evaluating like the wide receivers, Puka maybe is a perfect example of this. I think that they're very smart about saying, okay, we're going to draft somebody here. What do we want that specific position to do? That position is going to be asked to do ABC. I think in the old school, like draft, the way you think of the draft, you go, okay, the best player goes first, and then the second best player goes third, and then the next best player goes fourth. That's not necessarily the best way to build a team. You want the best player in the ways that you're going to ask them to be the best player. And you're not going to ask every receiver to do the exact same things. Sometimes you need a field stretcher, but you also need him to be able to do A, B, and C in addition to being fast. Sometimes you need somebody who's going to work the short intermediate area of the field. That's what we're going to predominantly ask him to do, but we also need him to do A, B, and C. These are the things. I think that they identify the things that they're going to ask that person to do with their specific offense and play calling in mind. And then they find people who are off the charts in those specific things, the best at these specific things that we're going to actually utilize him to do. Okay, so I think they're really good at that. I think that's how they find Puka. I think there are a bunch of players that they're able to hit on from a value standpoint because they're specific. I think with regards to their roster construction, they're like, what is important that we are able to do? Well, they like to run a ton of 11 personnel. They run 11 more than anyone in the NFL consistently. You need a tight end on the field who can do exactly what you need your tight end to do on all of those plays. They've dealt with a lot of injuries at the tight end position. Maybe they felt like we don't have depth at this position that we can trust, and we cannot afford for our weak link to be this particular player if Tyler Higbee gets hurt. So I need to create some depth at this position in the immediate future where it can also benefit me in the long term because Tyler Higbee's contract is up in a year. And now I've got somebody that I can elevate here, and then I'll go fill that spot later. I think that they probably did that with the running back position. It might not necessarily be a signal of like, hey, we need to get Kyron. We need to upgrade Kyron. It might be, injuries happen at running back. This happens consistently. There is a pattern there, and we need to know that we're set there.
Yeah.
And so we're going to create some depth here that we feel comfortable with, where it's next man up, and not in a way where it's just cheesy, but like literally we need to have the bodies there so that there's no drop off if this happens. Like you're planning for contingencies to a degree.
That's smart.
And maybe in the future, when you think about the fact that they collected the 2 firsts and they're in a position to potentially go get a quarterback next year, if the year is better at quarterback, then maybe they build around like a rookie. You need to have more people around to support. But I don't know that you don't need to change the offense all that dramatically. If you stick to your plan and you have depth and you have talent and you have people who are good at their specific jobs, then that kind of goes back to Belichick's, like, do your job, yours specifically. We found you because you're good at this. Now just do that. And then everybody else will be okay.
Yeah, no, it's so interesting. And that's why I love having these conversations ahead of the season, because you hit on it, right? Tyler Higbee has had injuries, even Kyren Williams, and thinking about the depth and what the Rams needed last year to forego that stretch where they started the season, 1-4. They had a really slow start because their offensive line was banged up. And then the concern of their wide receivers, Puka and Cooper, were out for at least a few weeks in the beginning of the season. How do you shore up and put yourself in a situation where you can sort of backfill and protect yourself? But my conspiracy theory was, and you hit on it, which I appreciate, was they're planning for next year. If they implement this run game, they get this run game going and they hit on it and they fine tune it this year. Next season, let's say they draft a Arch Manning. We don't know, but you mentioned it. And I thought it was a very good point with the 2 first rounders. Now it's a softer, easier, more efficient, seamless entry point for a rookie running back to have all cylinders go in terms of their running backs with Jarquez. And we don't know how Jarquez is going to be implemented. We don't know yet what's going on with the Blake Corum experiment. But we do know that Kyren Williams is the lead back in that committee. And it'll be interesting to see, like you mentioned, they love 11 personnel. How much more will they change that? Will they look to change that this season?